About 6 years ago, I decided to commit my life to connecting people and things together in a very, very large global way. And in doing that, I'm kind of what you would call a designer. But a designer is pretty much a dreamer. And a designer in this world that I'm trying to create requires engineers, many engineers. So I had to go out and find my engineer. And that engineer came in the form of Richard Ivan Miller. And we went on this journey to go about with this idea that required really a solution that required land and sea. And I was the sea part, he was the land part, peanut butter chocolate, and that's how it sort of worked out. But I'd like to start with a little bit of historical context to help tell the story. In 1910, the Mexican Revolution broke out. At the tender age of 15, my father's father, Salvador Roy Atilano de Alba, and yes, that is one man's name, was drafted into the northern Mexican army under the command of General Francisco Pancho Villa. After a year of fighting, he decided to flee to the United States in search of a better life. When he crossed over, he had nothing, and he was a war refugee, he was an immigrant, and technically you could say he was an undocumented worker. But he came here, made a life for himself, married his beautiful wife, Juanita, my grandmother, and raised children, 6 of them, during the Great Depression. Now imagine, he just left a war that killed 1.3 million people. That is more lives lost than American lives lost in the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam combined. Faith. I can't introduce myself without talking about faith. I grew up in a very religious family. My father became an ordained minister, and my grandfather went back to Mexico every weekend, Mexicali, as a missionary. And he would go preach the gospel. And as a child, I'd go over there, and I was from East LA. I was from the barrio. We had an incredible reputation, but as a child, I never understood it. Because when I went to Mexicali, that's what poverty is. There were no streetlights, there were no streets. And the children around me didn't have shoes. So I thought we were wealthy, which was great, because later on I learned, well, maybe I wasn't, but I was fortunate. We were fortunate. So it was important that this faith, which I'm going to come back to later, is a very, very important factor in what I'm doing today. Relationships. I was the youngest of 7 children. And everybody talks about developmental years between the ages of 1 and 5. That is so important in a child's education and development. I mean, we spend a lot of money in upper education, but boy, that 1 through 5 is where, like, I don't know, 80% of all that development goes on. And as a child, my parents couldn't afford to put me in any programs, but I had 6 brothers and sisters. And I was constantly back and forth with them. I was playing with them, talking with them, learning from them, watching them make mistakes, learning from them how to sort of manipulate, getting them into trouble, all kinds of things. And so being a youngster was a completely different perspective from my oldest brother, who left at 17 years old. He went on to be successful, but it was in a different way, in a different world. Music changed my life. My brother taught me to play chess, which was a strategic game. It was really great, and he had a method of teaching me. He never let me win. But it was his cousin, who was the same age, who used to come out to the house. His name was Bobby, and he brought a guitar. And with that guitar, he introduced me to 4 people that would change my life forever. Those 4 people's names were John, Paul, George, and Ringo. He played Eleanor Rigby, Rocky Raccoon, Hey Jude. Oh my God, my head exploded. I was singing in church all that time, and those songs really weren't very inspiring. I'm sorry to say that. But there was something about music that you really understood. And if you go back to the music origins of music, it was our way of communicating with God. And all of a sudden I understood why. there was a connection that was beyond anything. And later on, when I turned 12, I had this unique opportunity. Well, first I joined the school choir, and my music teacher said, you can carry a tune. Well, I said, yeah, I'm going to church 3 times a week, twice on Sundays. I sing every hymn in the book, so I can sing. And sure enough, he said, I'd like to take you for an audition to a place called, to a group called the California Boys Choir. And it was ranked one of the best boys choirs in the world. They were a professional boys choir. They toured around the country, and they came from all walks of life, which was really interesting. But there was a reason why they came from all walks of life. The cost of joining that choir was the same as going to a private college. My parents could never afford that. But the founders thought it important to go ahead and get kids from the inner cities and create a scholarship program. This is very important. To open the door and give access, opportunity to whoever wants it. And that was important for me. So music was big. But one story I want to share with you real quick was I had an encounter with my Creator at the age of 12 that I don't think will ever be repeated again. And it happened at our choir camp. We were at La Sierra College in Riverside on the 7th floor of a dormitory building where we trained all summer. We lived there with other boys. We shared all these dorm rooms. And I got violently sick. And there was a new kid who came over from New York who was 2 years older than me, and he was sick by the time he got there. And so we were quarantined because we didn't want to get all the other boys sick. So we were quarantined for about 4 days. And we had to sit there and sort of talk to each other because we didn't have television. And I grabbed a Bible because I didn't have anything to read. My mother packed a Bible for me, so sure enough, I'm doing that. And he sort of asked me about, what are you doing? What are you reading? And I'm saying, I'm reading my Bible. You know, don't you know what a Bible is? And he said, well, yeah, I know what a Bible is, but he's asking me questions. And he started asking me questions about who's the main star of the show. I'm saying, well, it's Jesus Christ, how I was taught. And so he started asking me. I said, well, don't you know Jesus Christ? Don't you know all the stories? And he's like, no, I don't. And I just thought, oh, you're from Mars then. Because everybody knows who Jesus Christ is. This is the perspective of a child. But he didn't. And boy, he was 14, I was 12. That's the difference between, you might as well be 20 and 30. So I'm looking up to this kid and I'm saying, oh, I've got him now. I can tell him everything because I know all my dad's sermons. I know all the stories about the bread, about getting the dead guy and bringing him back to life. So I just go off on it. I'm just telling him everything over and over and over again. And after hours and hours of talking, I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I did a, what they call an altar call with him. Altar call is when the end of the sermon is when you call people over to accept God into their lives. And I knew how to do it the first time ever, but I saw my dad do it 1,000 times. Put your hands on the shoulder and you start saying the words. And what was remarkable about it was that I felt something go through me. Not in me, but through me. And it went through me and into him. And we both had this reaction that we'll both take to our graves. And both of us shared that experience that we both knew it was real and knew that it was that moment. And there was a message in that going through me. And that message was simply this: you are not alone. Where there are 2 or more of you, I will be there. So people are my connection to God. My relationships are my connection to God. The one with my wife, the one with my kids, the one with my parents, my family, everybody. The ones I meet, my friends, my critics, they are all put there. And we all sort of bounced. You know, we're like protons and neutrons, and negatively charged, positively charged. We all bounce around each other. Sometimes we bond. And that's just the way I started looking at life. So God obviously became a central figure to me, and that's sort of how I just put faith into things. Faith are the things you cannot see or touch. You know, you just kind of have to believe. So I had this thing. I was a knucklehead. If I lost, I kept going on. And if I believed, I believed. I didn't have to see it, feel it, or touch it. Later on in life, that's when the effort started. Had to go to college. Had to get an education. Liked international relations. Loved it. Just thought, boy, I could learn all about the world and how we all get together. And I was a little cynical at the end after listening to all the history, to be honest with you. And my teacher said, can you say in a couple of words what you learned in your 4 years? And I said, yes, self-interest rule. That's the lesson I got, self-interest rule. And that's a youngster coming out of college. You think you got it, you think you know everything, but you don't. During that time, after school, I had to find a job. Worked at Super Shuttle for a while. Just when they started implementing GPS, which is in everybody's phone today, but in 1990, the military had just given it to that company. One of the first ever to understand how satellites could actually see where a driver was so you couldn't lie to the dispatcher anymore. And I was a dispatcher and a driver, so I had both sides of that coin. And I learned, hey, I started watching flows of traffic, understanding the entire freeway network over years, and got that. But then, after I graduated from school, I went to the port of Long Beach and got a job as a manager moving containers off ships, trains, and trucks. And little did I know I was entering the $14 trillion a year industry, where $500 billion is spent every year just shuttling the containers from boat to port. And I was just amazed at it. What I was most amazed at was how old the system was that was moving these containers. And the systems, they were 50 years old. So I kept asking my trainers while I was doing this. I almost got fired because I just kept on asking why. Why are you doing it this way? And the answer always was, because we've always done it that way. Because those are the rules. And I realized, okay, this is probably not for me, but believe it or not, I went 7 more years in that job. And I got a PhD in learning how to move containers from ships, trains, and trucks onto inland distribution warehouses. And I kept on voraciously just wanting to learn more and more about this beautiful thing called the container supply chain. So I learned about it, but one problem with the container supply chain was it was polluting, very, very polluting. And if you really understand what a truck does to the freeway network, it's amazing. A truck is 30,000 times more damaging than, a semi-truck loaded is 30,000 times more damaging than a car to the road surface. They use diesel, which creates diesel death zones around freeways. But the real big one for all you drivers out there, one truck counts for 10 cars when you measure congestion, traffic congestion. So that's when the light went on. Wow, if you could take trucks off the freeway, wouldn't that be the greatest thing? Well, fortunately, working at the ports, the containers were coming off the ships pretty slowly, and I started to help with some colleagues, started to look at ways to take containers off ships faster. And finally came up with this platform and this idea to take containers off ships 3 times faster than they are today. The problem was that once you got them onto the port, you couldn't get the trucks in fast enough, you couldn't get the trains in fast enough. So I just thought about this and I said, I needed a new right of way, I needed a new pipeline. You know, that's the vernacular for the tech industry. I need a pipeline for the bandwidth of containers I'm pushing through. And then it ended up being a real pipeline. What if we build sewer lines and make them 15 foot wide and put rail cars and stick a container on it? And that's sort of the gist of the story of the inventions that we were working on. And with that, I decided to go ahead and go about pursuing that idea. And I suddenly realized that there were byproducts to this idea. Number one, you could run all on electrification, no fossil fuel. Number two, it turned the ships faster and turned the trains faster, which meant more money. So I said, well, this is a pretty great idea. But then all of a sudden, other things, boy, the clean air you could have, the reduction in traffic, and all these, and then the jobs creation on the infrastructure, because this was going to cost billions. And so all these things started to come together, and the more I tried to tell my story to people, the more they kept on saying, no way, too audacious, too big. You're trying to solve one of the biggest problems of modern industrial landscapes in transportation. And who are you to do it? So I proceeded to go about hammering away at it, and we started a patent in 2010. So we had to gamble for 5.5 years, because that's how long it took to execute this patent. 5.5 years, I would risk my professional career, go out there, knock on doors to senators, congressmen, city council members, got a resolution of support from Sierra Club for the first time in their history for a multi-billion-dollar transportation project. Went to every union they told me would build me a set of concrete slippers and throw me in the water at the port. Went to them and they got the idea too. The Teamsters Trucking Union, for instance. These guys knew that trucks do create problems, and there's better ways to move used trucking. And so you would think that enemies to this were actually friends, and there were a lot of potential enemies, but they could be potential friends. So 5.5 years, taking the risk, big risk. But 5.5 years later, for the first time in my family, I was awarded one of these. I'm very proud of this. This is a US patent that the government of the United States says I have a commercialized idea. So, with that, I'm emboldened. I'm emboldened to believe that people can believe in ideas this big, because in all honesty, someone spelled it out for me. They said, you need somebody all the way up from the President of the United States to a ditch digger to get this project to work. And I said, okay, well that would require the federal government, the state government, local municipalities, a couple of mayors, supports. Yeah, we can do that. Sure, why not? So what they thought was impossible, I think it's not only possible, but it creates a momentum, it creates a movement. Because I never claimed I could build this thing. That was not my role. My purpose, however, was to tell people that you can build it. And the biggest lesson of all, with all of these elected officials and all of these captains of industries, and I've been in offices of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. I've been to Singapore and preached this idea to a full industry of saying, we're coming and your industry is going to change. But the truth of the matter, the simple lesson is that it's really about you. Believe it or not, democracy really works in America. Elected officials really listen to their constituents. They listen to their voters. My big problem is that I'm just the son of Salvador Roy Atilano de Alba. I don't have a big name, I'm not a billionaire. I can't get the word out to tell you about how we can do this together. So fortunately, I have this great opportunity to just kind of say, hey, I'm just like you, but I'm an entrepreneur. And the only difference between an entrepreneur and everybody else is it's somebody who goes about a business endeavor at great personal financial risk. That's the difference between me and most of the people. So I've accepted this role. I've kind of accepted it and embraced it. And I'm hoping that today I can reach a couple of you out there to say that I'm not here to build it. This is for everyone. We just need to start believing we can build the big things again. Thank you.